There's a man in a private room making plans for me in my home. Sure, he's a good man, well, he's got his concrete ideals. Everything is swell, swell, swell. Everything is swell. His friends are looking down on me and my friends in our little town, and that's the way it's always been. Get our cues from the rules of noblemen. Noblemen in their suits with their noble pursuits, but that ain't gonna fly anymore. No, no more. Cast your mind back upon a time when the girl you once were committed the crime of your decision to let one go. That was the brother that I will never know. May she never know. Sneaking into some old lady's den, she said, hold your skirt up, hold your tears in. If you're a lucky girl, then you might live to tell. Here, mama, I thought I knew you so well. But she says, well, that's the hell that a woman knew well. Thank God it's not the case anymore. No, no, no more. I'm a girl in the sterile room, reconciling with eternal doom. Up on a pillar somehow I fell, and now I'm weighing my life against the swell, 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 against the swell. So,
thank you, friends, for joining this evening as we do an info session about our whole lives, the Human Health and Sexuality program of Unitarian Universalism. We have a chalice lighting and reading up here next. Following that will be a brief introduction to the OWL program, a teacher testimonial, one of our real-life facilitators, a parent testimonial who's children in the program, and then a participant testimonial who has gone through the Our Whole Lives program. We'll also talk briefly about the weekend logistics for our upcoming training at East Shore Unitarian Church, and then we will have a short Q&A. So if you're just joining us, welcome. I did mention before, but we are recording this so that we can put it on YouTube and use as an outreach tool and just help people get introduced to the program and what we've got going on here in the Northwest. So as all of us know, the Supreme Court has just taken away one of our, briefly, I should say, long-standing constitutional rights, and I'm sure so many of us are just feeling the grief and confusion and shock, maybe, even though we did receive news of the leak several months ago. It still, I'm sure, came as a shock. So just, I think we're holding that in this space as we move forward and talk about the Our Whole Lives program, recognizing what our faith does in contributing not only to reproductive justice, but also to being a loving and welcoming an affirming tradition where we value everyone's sexuality and their wholeness of gender as well. So I'm just holding that in the space I don't have a chalice with me, but I can light my hand chalice and symbolize the flame of justice in our hearts and in our community. So our whole lives started, goodness, probably 30 years ago. No, 35 or 40 years ago, I should say. Um, in the early 80s, after the About Your Sexuality program of Unitarian Universalism, and it is an all ages lifespan development program for Unitarian Universalism and the United Church of Christ. It also reaches into secular community by offering its contents to trainers who want to teach it out in the community at large. In our Unitarian Universalist context, we use a faith component that goes along with each of the curriculum and introduces just simple activities like a chalice lighting and a reading that we often use to accompany the trainings and each of the workshops. Um, there's 3 levels of training, and at the Labor Day OWL program at East Shore, we are offering training for each of the 3 levels. It starts in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, and the second elementary level is 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. Those are trained together. The second level of training is for youth, and that is for, I'm just going to mute you, Maya, sorry. The second level of training is for 7th, 8th, and 9th, as well as 10th, 11th, and 12th. That's the youth training. And then we have an adult training that has 3 curriculums within it: a young adult, an adult, and an elder adult. The elder adult is the training that has the curriculum that has been most recently released. 2 of the other curriculum are also getting updated as we speak and should be available by the August, or the September, I should say, Labor Day training at East Shore. That's the K1-2 and the 10, 11, 12. And we're really excited. The new editions of the curriculum incorporate more diversity and work with anti-racism, as well as gender diversity, and help go beyond the binary that was embedded into the previous curriculum of OWL. And so we're really excited to see these new additions and to be able to include the larger community in this work, both racially and with gender diversity. So I'm going to screen share. There's kind of 2 key components of OWL that really, I think, help set it apart from standard maybe health classes on sexuality, and that is the Bill of Rights and the circles of sexuality. So I will screen share those. Let's see if you can see this nicely. Whoops. Sorry. There we go. How is this legible? So it reads that the OWL Bill of Rights, in this program, the participants have the right to ask any questions they have about sexuality, receive full and accurate information about sexuality, gain the knowledge and values needed to make decisions about sexual matters, be supported in sexual expression that is healthy and life-affirming, and be treated with respect by facilitators and other participants in the group. I feel like this Bill of Rights is so fundamental. This curriculum has come out of Unitarian Universalism and the United Church of Christ, and it's able to speak to that interconnection that we feel as facilitators of the program with our participants. We want to ensure that they're empowered, that they feel safe and secure and loved in the curriculum and the work that we do. And this Bill of Rights is our commitment as a congregation and as facilitators to the participants and to the families to ensure what we're agreeing to when we take on this sacred and important work. The second thing I want to lift up is the circles of sexuality. Circles of sexuality speaks to the value. So we talk a lot about sexuality, but we also talk about other things like sensuality, intimacy, sexual identity, and sexual health and reproduction. And in all of our curricula, the 7 levels of curricula that I talked about that encompass the lifespan of this program, we deal with all of these issues in age appropriate and developmentally appropriate ways. And affirming our values is, as you can see, right at the center of these circles of sexuality. Now, one word that I know comes up a lot when we talk about OWL is age appropriate or developmentally appropriate. I know I'm just a young parent myself. I was telling Stephanie, just stepping into parenthood with 2 little children, just 10 months old and 2.5. But already I feel like my skills as a facilitator are being put to use when we talk about how we get dressed and using the bathroom and cleaning ourselves. I can hear my OWL skills coming up and at play with talking about boundaries and how we ask for consent. I mean, it really starts at such an early age, and learning to be a facilitator of OWL, going through the curriculum, and then using your leadership skills in the classroom with students of different age, whether they're little children or your peers as adults, is such an empowering way to develop your own vocabulary around sexuality, to feel more comfortable talking about sex. Although we do encourage people to already be somewhat comfortable talking about it, because you do have to use words like sex and sexuality and relationships. You talk about different body parts like vulvas and vaginas and penises. So we're really using that vocabulary in the classroom, and the training can help walk you through all of that curriculum in a way to get familiar with really often what is so commonly seen as a taboo. This curriculum helps to tear down that taboo of culture around sexuality and bodies, and helps empower both the facilitators and then in the classroom the participants to embrace our bodies and to talk about it in, again, a safe, secure, and loving environment. So I will pass it to David Langrock, who is one of our OWL facilitators at East Shore Unitarian Church, where I'm the Director of Religious Education. And David, please take it away.
Right. Thank you so much for that introduction and that I think really timely song at the beginning. Hi, everybody. I'm David Langrock. I use he, him pronouns. And indeed, I am a member of East Shore, where I was my first encountering of the OWL program 10 years ago, when my 3 teenage sons had that opportunity. And I'm not going to talk about the parent role, because I know we have a parent here, but I will say that's how I learned about the program. And I identify, I'm bisexual, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I grew up as a teenager in the 1980s in Texas, and how little access I had to the words, the identities of the representation. And I thought, if I had the OWL curriculum, I could have had so much more better opportunity to really grow and flourish in my own sexuality at that age. And so I felt called deeply. I get emotional when I talk about it, because it's such a important, such an important thing that I can do as part of a as a giving back to all the youth, whether or not they're queer or trans or et cetera, asexual, all of these things. And so that I just really wanted to talk about my calling and why I'm passionate about it. I would also say, so I've been trained in two of the three levels, or I guess offerings, both in the youth, which is what I originally got trained in, and then also in the adult training as well. More recently, we held a training similar to this at eShore about 4 or 5 years ago, and that's when I got that second training. I have I've done, but first of all, I'll talk about the training for facilitators. It is, it's really exciting. You go through, you don't go through all the material bit by bit. You definitely dabble, you jump into it, you actually do some of the activities, but you also learn about how do you hold a space, right? You learn the difference between what, facilitation, and learn that, you're not there to impart your views or your knowledge necessarily. You can share that, but to really create a space for the participants, the youth or the adults, in the case of where I was trained, to discover that from the material in the course and to ask questions. And for me, the power, especially with the youth, of the youth having conversations with one another. I mean, they are modeling the kind of conversations that are going to be so important throughout their lives, and so important in that time of their life, right? To just be able to say those words Amanda just said, and so much more. So at any rate, that's the facilitation training is not just getting, here's the long curriculum, learn all of that. That's only part of it. You learn some of that, but really you're learning about how to be a teacher, how to be a facilitator. So I learned a lot, even tangential, not just to OWL, but just the skills of how do you just hold a space, I think could be the way I say it, and because I'm Unitarian, I also really do love the chalice sliding and the other pieces of our faith that we bring into it. But of course, it's not just a Unitarian curriculum. I want to tell you about one specific moment in my most recent class that we just completed. We had 5 youth go through, and it was a small class. It was 6 actually, and there were 5 on the last day. I'm thinking through it, but there was 6, which is a smaller class than normal. But of course, after COVID, it's been really I was happy to have such great participants from the beginning to the end. This is a 26-week curriculum. The youth really came out of their shells and really talked more and more, and the curriculum takes you along, so that when you're really getting to the big powerful messages towards the end that they can pick up on, they've kind of broken the ice. And towards the end, one of the things I thought was so cool, I really want to share, we actually had a grab bag of birth control devices and various birth control methods, and it was really neat. I got to see things in physical real life I'd never seen before. What does an IUD look like? What does a implant look like? What do birth control pills? What does that container look like? Et cetera, et cetera. And it was so I think fantastic to just see the youth. It just demystified it, right? I mean, so much about birth control, if it's just a screen and just being talked about in a very distanced way, is just still mysterious. And I feel like the way, and we incorporated it really interesting way, because if you pulled out the device, it had a little story about it, and there was an invitation to read, and it was so interactive. And I just don't know, I mean, I've gone through, as a student, I've gone through the sort of care version of training. I don't think that that would be something that other curriculums offer in that way. So it was just very powerful. I could go on and on. I'm very passionate about it. I guess the last thing I'll say is the other, I was one of 4 facilitators that were rotating in and out because of lots of, there's lots going on. And so it was a shared experience, but you always have 2 facilitators per class. And I learned so much from them and their teaching skills as well. There's some really powerful teachers. One of them is on here, or facilitators. I call them facilitators. One of them is Millie, who's was also part of my training as a facilitator. But at any rate, I just think that there's so much you get out of it. And of course, you learn so much from the questions that get asked. I could go on and on. I'm going to pause. I'll stop. I will say that I am going to be leaving a little early. So when I pop out in a little bit, it's not because I'm not wanting to stay, but I have a thing that I'm doing a little later. But anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, David. I think you touched on so much of the power of OWL in such a beautiful way about sharing the ministry with other facilitators, about the calling that you feel, and then about the opportunity within the congregation to step into that calling. That was really, really beautiful. Thank you. Now I will pass it to Stephanie, who is a parent of 4 children, 3 of whom have gone through OWL at the Saltwater Unitarian congregation in Des Moines, Washington. Stephanie.
Hi there. Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate the introduction. I actually came across this curriculum and this information based on the other Amanda who's on the call with Unitarian Church. And I was completely blown away by the expansive information that's available to the kids and how long the curriculum goes for. And I found it very valuable from a multitude of perspectives. But number one, I think one of the biggest things that called me to have the kids look at it. Well, just step back. I have 4 children. One of them is 23. And she did this training. I think she did the 7 through 9 was the first one. So way back when, and when she had gotten through it, she was not excited, let me tell you, about going to go for 26 weeks to do sex education. But when she first got introduced to it, I know that she was able to see things that she wasn't able to before, and just the availability to ask questions without having judgment, and getting to know other kids going through the same thing at the same time. I mean, she had some friends that were there. One of them is also on this call. And that was a very powerful way, I think, to share such an intimate and difficult topic. But the other piece that I found beautiful besides the actual content was the ability to communicate and have the words, have the language, have the skills through all aspects of it. Because I feel like in our schools, like our public schools, we just haven't had that space to do that. And I felt like knowing the facilitator and knowing the background with which the content was going to be shared, it felt like it was giving a whole different avenue for learning that was creating a foundation for a very healthy sexual, I guess, knowledge and base that they could then carry forward into adults. And it's just not available. I mean, and the thing is about talking with it as your own child. I feel like there's so much emotional attachment to it. It's really hard for sometimes the child to say everything they want to say or everything they need to say, but in a separate environment, like at the OWL class, that they had more of that, to more freedom to be able to go through all of those pieces of it. Having done the class, then when she was in the actual public high school, and they did what they call flash curriculum. She came home and kind of rolled her eyes. She's like, Mom, I can't even believe it. They essentially are telling you abstinence is the only choice, and like that's the best choice. And they pretty much gloss over the factual pieces of it, but they don't really get into the content or the communication or the relationship of sex, all of which she very clearly has learned quite a bit from. And I was basically sold on making sure that all of my kiddos had access to that, because I cannot imagine them not having the full spectrum of all of those pieces to move forward, especially now with so much conversation about the content, but not necessarily going to the depths that the OWL training provides. So anyhow, I don't know, I'm kind of going around. But yeah, so I'm very, very grateful that my kids have had it, and I'm chomping at the bit for my 10-year-old to be able to do the 7 through 9 program or whatever OWL next class is available. So, but yes, I've had a 23, a 20-year-old, a 15-year-old. Actually, a 15-year-old son was in the middle of the 7 through 9 when COVID hit. So he missed the last 2 classes, but he was grateful for that piece. And I will just share one last thing, is that it impacted him so much that he has been he's been a stand for his friends. He's had some friends. He's had 2 friends specifically, one who has not been able to be in a safe environment with their parents around being bisexual. And so Andrew, my son, has offered to have our house be that safe place. And so he's actually having things being mailed to our home so he can come and get on his bike and come and pick them up here, because he can't do that at his own home. So Andrew is being an advocate for 2 different friends with regards to giving them support and being that vocal person for them. And I can appreciate that. I think OWL played a role in some of that and being open about it. So yeah, I'm grateful for that.
Beautiful, Stephanie. That was just so amazing to hear about your experience as a parent, and then also hear a glimpse into what you've seen, how you've seen it help develop with your children. And I mean, you spoke to the content, you spoke to the communication piece, the empowerment piece that we see in participants, and also just that piece of being reassured as a parent that your kids are being given information that you feel like is important in a safe environment, in a container that you know they're getting welcoming, life affirming, science based, accurate information, right? And just how important that is. I know I speak a lot in my congregation about the value of non parental or non guardian adults in just playing a role in children's lives. And psychologically, how important that is to healing trauma and just, you know, developing through adolescence and into adulthood. Those adults can really be something. So OWL provides an opportunity, I think, for people in the congregation as adults to help be those mentors in a really, really specific and safe way. So thank you. Now we will hear from a participant. Mia, if you are there, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
So David and Steph went over most of what I would have said. Like, Al is far and away the most in-depth and expansive sex education just that I've even heard of. It has left me with very little questions moving forward in my life in that area, which has been an absolutely invaluable tool, and has also allowed me to know things as they come up as issues with other people, and provide support and assistance there if and when needed. I have not been to public school outside of this, or much of living on college, so, but Yeah, it's been a useful breadth of knowledge despite my lack of need of it personally.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to just hear a little bit about what information you did receive in public school. I mean, I know you mentioned that Stephanie kind of said that, but I would just love to hear more. It's a question that I have, as a religious educator, is what are the kids getting in school? I mean, I'd love to hear about that
I have,
more.
yeah,
Yeah.
I have never been to public school, so I don't
Oh,
know
okay, never mind.
firsthand. I've just never heard anyone else have anything remotely near the knowledge that I have outside of being in an L class. So,
Yeah. So you feel like in that way, like you said, you're able to support and be a resource for other teens in your
mhm,
life.
yeah.
Very cool.
So, Amanda, I can say, as the person who was doing a lot of the public school sex ed, the Flash curriculum is excellent. Unfortunately, the public schools don't have enough time. I mean, Flash does have a lot of relationship and other things, but the one thing that the Flash curriculum cannot do, and actually Beth Reese, who wrote it, was very, very good about making sure that we didn't push any values. Because, we'd always go talk to your parents, talk to your family, talk to your church, always doing that. And that, I think, is one of the baseline brilliant pieces of OWL, is that kids come up with their own values. So when you create a value from within your own internal self, it has such power. And, if somebody tries to give you a value, tells you this is an important value, well, maybe not. And listening to the young people talk to each other and having those words come out of their mouths, practicing that language. And that's true of the training. A lot of adults who aren't particularly comfortable with, I don't know if you ever saw, there was one of those shows that the woman was going to have to teach sex ed, and she was one of the TV shows that was more of a cartoon. She was going to have to teach sex ed, and she was not comfortable. So she'd go in and she'd say, happiness, 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 to try and work her way into saying penis. That and that you can see people kind of struggling with that a little bit. And certainly, Stephanie, when you're talking to your own kids, in the background in everybody's mind, you're talking about your bedroom, and that's personal and private. And it's one of the conundrums I have with the OWL, is how we can help. And I hope more people will take the adult OWL, because I do think the one piece that we used to do at Planned Parenthood that we don't do with OWL was we would have puberty workshops with the parents and the kids together, where the kid could see that mom could hear the word penis and not fall over, and that the parents did know this stuff. So I think that's a piece that's really important for parents to take their own comfort with sexuality seriously.
Thank you, Millie. That was so useful, and you reminded me that another important piece of the classes, of course, is the parent orientation. And in that parent orientation, I can't remember the exact question, but it gets at that notion of having the parents step into their own experience of sexuality, the messages that they received as children and as adolescents. And I think it's actually a healing exercise so that parents can have that opportunity to kind of, in a lot of cases, unfortunately, let go of negative messages that they received as children or youth around sexuality, and even possibly difficult experiences that parents went through. And it connects it to the values that we have in the OWL program and why we want to do this work, right? That we want to empower parents and children and youth and adults with accurate important information about sexuality, and that we want to, be proactive in that, right? Rather than getting negative messaging or abstinence-based messaging, we want to be proactive in the information that we share. So now I will talk a little bit about the weekend logistics of the upcoming training. We mentioned, David mentioned briefly somewhat about the OWL training. I think this is our third time hosting it at East Shore over Labor Day. So I don't know if it's too early to call it a tradition, but it certainly feels like one to an extent. And we're excited to be partnering with the Pacific Western region. Amanda Radak is over here from the region working as our registrar and answering any questions that you might have about the registration process itself. And then we're also working with several other religious educators, in particular University Unitarian Church religious educator Aria Curtis, Northlake Unitarian Universalist congregation religious educator Margaret Rogers, and then the Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship, I believe, religious educator Genia Schmidt. So the five of us have been primarily working to organize this and to help get the word out to our congregants and get people excited about the work and also more connected to what that experience is. So I want to share the training schedule so you can see kind of what the workshop schedule is. As I said, there's 3 umbrella categories, so there's 3 trainings, and then under each of the trainings there's 2 subcurricula. In the adult there's 3. So if you sign up for the elementary age OWL training, you get trained and are able to facilitate either the K1-2 or the 4-5-6 levels. If you sign up for the youth class, you get trained and you're able to either facilitate, or you're able to facilitate both, I should say, the 7, 8, 9 and the 10, 11, 12. And then if you get trained in the adult curriculum, you're able to teach the young adult, the adult, or the elder adult curriculum. Now, if you have been trained before, there's no harm in getting trained again. It is a full packed weekend of, I believe, 21 hours of training in 3 days, basically 2.5 days. And it's a lot of information. And if you go for too long without having a training, we do encourage you to get trained again. And like I said, there's new curricula being released in the K1-2 and the 10, 11, 12 that does incorporate more work around multiculturalism, anti-oppression, and anti-racism, as well as gender diversity and trying to get beyond the binary with the language used in the curriculum. So there has been a lot of work to update those aspects. I just want to screen share what the registration page looks like briefly so you're familiar with it. And you do select one of the 3 levels, for example, and it will take you to something like this where you fill out your information. Now you do want to talk with your religious educator, who is typically the coordinator or a minister. If you are part of a congregation, they can help direct you if you're not sure what level you want to sign up for. They might have a need that they know about in the community. For example, I know that I really need more elementary age OWL teachers. So when people ask me, oh, what level should I teach? I'll probably, say that. So that's just an example of why you might want to talk to someone who works at your congregation or facilitates the OWL program within your congregation. The other reason that you might want to speak with them is to help guide you about finances. So, for example, the class does cost $325 to get trained during the weekend, but most religious educators and congregations are able to offset that and help cover those funds if that is at all a barrier of access. churches are more often than not able to do that. So, yeah, so Taya, I'll answer your question here. If you sign up for the elementary, that means you're getting trained to teach both K1, 2, and 4, 5, 6 curriculums. So you are getting trained to teach both of those. And actually, this reminds me of another reason that you would want to talk to your religious educator, which is to get access to those curriculum books. You will need, when you're in the training, you will want to have at least one of the levels of curriculum so that you can use it as a reference material during the facilitator training and that weekend. So the other thing I want to show you is the schedule. I know a lot of people have questions about what the schedule of the weekend is, so let's just share that. Just take a deep breath, because like I said, it is a long weekend. So, we do our best to break it up over 3 days, and let's see if I can't enlarge that at all. We also include meals and the option or a church stay option if you are traveling from out of town. We're more than happy to host you at the congregation or in a house, and that's part of the registration form. So on Saturday, you arrive for check-in and breakfast. You go right into the workshop at 9 a.m. For 3.5 hours. Now, there are breaks in here, and each trainer will determine with their co-trainer when you have the breaks. So there are breaks built in to this, but you do not see them here. So no, you're not sitting in the classroom for 3.5 hours. There's going to be at least 2 breaks during that time. Then we have lunch on site. All these meals that you see listed are provided. The ones that aren't listed are not provided. So on the first day, there's breakfast, lunch, and dinner with 3 sessions of workshop for a total of 9 hours of training. On the second day, there's breakfast and lunch, no dinner, with 2 sessions of workshop. And on the third day, there's breakfast with 1 session of workshop. So that's what the weekend looks like. For the I want to say, Amanda Radak, maybe you can help me out. I want to say there's homework or an hour and a half of homework ahead of time that you will be sent in advance. So we'd like everyone to register by August 1st. What other questions do you have? Feel free to put them in the chat. I am recording, so you can put them in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute, you're more than able to ask those. Love to hear from you. What are you curious about? Let's see.
I'm going to fill the space a little bit just in case somebody's typing. So the Unitarian Universalist Church and the United Church of Christ have co-developed this curriculum. And so some of the trainers and some of the participants may be from a Unitarian Universalist church, some may be from the United Church of Christ, and we have non-denominational folks that may be at any given training. There are some public schools and some private schools, more private than public, that are having the entire middle school staff come be trained, or other denominations that are leaning into this work. We've seen Methodist and Disciples of Christ, and yeah, so there's all kinds of people that may be participating, and we have trainers, maybe not for this training, but there are secular OWL trainers in our rosters as well. Anne, you're unmuted.
Anne, yes, please. Hi.
when will training materials be available to us?
So, most of the so you'll get the homework via email in advance, somewhere mid-August. You will get most of the training packet in a folder on the Saturday of the training. Yes, but you are able to, Anne's at my congregation, so I'm lucky enough to have her here. But more generally speaking, if you're interested in a training, I would talk to your religious educator or whoever coordinates OWL at your congregation, because more than likely they will have access to a curriculum and would be happy to lend it to you to get familiar with the content.
Right, okay.
And I happened to have the opportunity to be in a workshop last week with Melanie Davis and Amy Johnson, who are the denominational
Right.
holders of this of the content for these trainings, the OWL, like national OWL facilitator or coordinators. And they are hoping that the new release of curriculum will be available for purchase prior to this training. So if you're looking at, Amanda, help me with which levels, 10, 12, and K1?
Exactly. 10,
Okay.
11, 12, and K1 too.
So they are, all of their work is done and it is at the publisher. And so it's when is it going to release? How is the supply chain going to feed into this? Their hope is that before this training, we will be able to pre-order those levels of curriculum if we need them. And they're working to negotiate, if the paper copies won't be in hand by September 1, that pre-ordering the paper copy will get a PDF preview copy to trainees, so to would-be facilitators. So it's still in negotiation, but that's when that would be available.
I thought of another important aspect of facilitation, which David briefly mentioned this in the training. You touch on the materials, but you're not getting trained session by session. Right? So you're doing that overview of content. You do a project with a small group where you present and practice facilitating one of the workshops. But you're not dealing with each individual workshop that you might be facilitating in a congregation or community setting. So when you do sign up to be a facilitator of a workshop, most congregations, like David mentioned, sign you up with 3 other individuals, so that it's typically a team of 4 and you take turns teaching. And the prep work into that can be, maybe Millie, you want to speak to this, having just recently taught it yourself, but I want to say it's an hour to 2 hours of prep work, depending on your familiarity with the course, ahead of the actual workshop. Millie, does that sound
Well,
about right to you?
well, it depends, of course, on the particular class. Some take more than others. And certainly you find that there are people who are kind of into that and like it and fall all over it. A lot of fun. And then others who hope that the other facilitator will do it. But the other piece that's so important about the training is, and why we use the word facilitator rather than teacher, is that sometimes adults especially think that they have to know everything and, fall into the school mentality of, I have all this wisdom I'm going to dump on you, instead of facilitating the wisdom and knowledge burbling up from within the students. And it's really more focused on helping people, yes, be comfortable with the material, but also comfortable with the idea that they're not there to educate in the same way that schools educate. It's more holding the space, providing information for sure, but mostly about the conversation. And like Amanda said, a lot of the trainings I've done that weren't in churches, I've done with a UCC co-facilitator, and that's been a lot of fun. And we've done it for Catholic institutions. One of the most powerful trainings I did was a Catholic institution where an evangelical pastor changed his mind about gay experience. It was astounding. And you know, it's so powerful if you put it out there and let people wrestle with it within their own hearts. They come up with great stuff that you'd never even think of. That's why the training is so helpful.
Mm.
And yes, it does take a while, but it's not onerous, especially if you have 4 of you doing it. And some of the ones that take the most time are the most fun. So
Thank you, Millie. Really appreciate that. Are there any more questions? Joel, Taya, Stephanie, Amanda? Oh, I did think of one other question, or one other answer question, which is what age to be trained in OWL? And Amanda, do you want to answer that?
Do you have the answer, or were you asking?
I do have the answer.
Okay, well, go for it. You can.
So for the Unitarian Universalist congregations, the age is 25 and older. So we want you to be 25 and older to get trained and facilitate OWL. And if you're 25, please come and find me. I'd love to get you trained. And for the United Church of Christ, I believe it's 21, if I remember correctly. So if you're 21 and older, then you can teach in a UCC setting. So I believe that wraps it up for our info session. And I'll just do a closing, I don't know, just a little closing grounding exercise. So you can sit comfortably in your space. Feel free to close your eyes or pick somewhere in your room to gaze at. And just inhale through your nose. Exhale, you can clasp your hands together, holding them near your sacral chakra or your reproductive area. And just that is so the seat of our power in so many cultures. That is recognized as the seat of our power, the seat of our human energy, to be safe, secure, loved, and respected. I honor everyone who has come this evening and who will listen to this recording in the future. Honoring our sexuality in whatever form it may express itself, in all the variations and diversity, bodies in all their autonomy and sovereignty. Blessings, peace, shalom, ashe, and thus ends our info session.